You're listening to Reverie, True Crime, your gateway to the darkest corners of human nature, where we expose the hidden truths of human depravity. These harrowing stories serve as a sobering reminder to keep our senses keen and our awareness sharp, for predators lurk in unexpected places, patiently waiting and observing. Join us as we unravel mysteries, explore motives, and seek justice for victims as we bring awareness to these cases. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello and welcome to Reverie True Crime. I'm your host, Paige. Sometimes the people we love are taken from us in ways that don't make sense. And what hurts even more is when those in charge of finding answers don't seem to care enough to ask the right questions. This is one of those stories. Crystal McCrory Jones wasn't just a mother, a sister, or a wife. She was the glue in her family, the kind of person who gave everything she had to the people she loved. And when she died under deeply suspicious circumstances in February of 2023, her family did what anyone would do. They looked for the truth. But what they were met with was silence, indifference, an outright dismissal from the very people who were supposed to protect and investigate. This isn't only a story about a woman who died. It's about what happens when a community protects the wrong people, when evidence is brushed aside, and when the system shrugs its shoulders instead of stepping up. It's about a family left screaming into the void, begging someone, anyone, to take them seriously. These next few episodes may make you angry, and it should, because Crystal deserved better. Her family deserves better. And it's long past time someone listened. Let's talk about what really happened to Crystal McCrory Jones. She was born in Crossett, Arkansas on May 17, 1979. She was the second child and first daughter of Jana McGilton and Doyle Dwayne McCrory. And from early on, it was clear that Crystal had a strong will and even stronger heart. She grew up in Bastrop, Louisiana, a tight-knit community where everyone knows everyone. Crystal graduated from Bastrop High School in 1997, and not long after, she stepped into the role that would define much of her life, being a mom. Crystal had two sons, Corbin and Mason, who quickly became the center of her universe. She raised them with love and structure, and she worked hard, really hard, to give them the kind of life she believed they deserved. At first, she waited tables, grinding through long hours and short paychecks, but her determination did not go unnoticed. Eventually, she landed a job at State Farm Insurance as a licensed office representative, a position that would not only offer her stability, but also allow her to do what she loved most, help people. Her coworkers and clients alike described her as warm, outgoing, and generous, the kind of woman who remembered birthdays, brought in homemade treats, and always had something encouraging to say. And her laugh, people still talk about it. That full-bodied, contagious kind of laugh that just made you feel like you were in on something special. In late 2020, Crystal took a leap of faith. Alongside her husband, Tony Jones, she helped open a martial arts studio in Oak Grove, Louisiana. It was called Inner Peace Martial Arts. For Crystal, this wasn't just a business. It was a passion project. A place where people could feel empowered, supported, and grounded. But like many small businesses, the studio faced financial hurdles, especially toward the end of 2022. Crystal made the tough but responsible decision to return to her role at State Farm in January of 2023, just a month before her death. Her life was full of ordinary beauty. She loved decorating her home, cooking meals from scratch, traveling with her boys, and doting on her beloved dog, Rocket. She had a gift for bringing people together, whether for a weekend barbecue, a holiday meal, or just a casual hangout on the porch. Crystal wasn't flashy. She wasn't loud about her accomplishments, but she left her mark on people in quiet, lasting ways. Her friends talk about how she always made time, even when she was stretched thin. She could sense when someone needed comfort before they even said a word. And her family, they say that she was the glue, the one who remembered every birthday, who called just to check in, who would give her last dollar if someone needed it more. When Crystal passed away on February 9th, 2023, it wasn't just a sudden loss. It was a devastating rupture. And for those who knew Crystal, the pain wasn't just about losing her. It was about how she was lost. Because nothing about her death made sense. Not to them. They didn't just lose a sister, a mother, a wife, a daughter. They lost a very bright light. And when the questions about her final hours started to roll in, it was the memory of who she was. This picture of a strong, giving, ambitious woman that made it impossible to believe the official story. On February 9th, 2023, in Goodwill, Louisiana, Crystal McCrory Jones was found deceased in her home from a gunshot wound. Her husband, Tony Jones, supposedly concerned after she missed a doctor's appointment and did not respond to calls and texts, got in touch with Chuck Harris, a retired state trooper, current patrol deputy at West Carroll Sheriff's Department, and school resource officer at West Carroll School System to perform a welfare check. While Deputy Harris was entering the residence, Tony said that he and Harris were on the phone the whole time, and he told Deputy Harris how to get to the bedroom and asked him to search there. Lying on the bed with a pillow over her face and a handgun in her right hand, the initial assessment by authorities suggested a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Before we get into the details, let's step back and look at the events that led up to this point. About a week before she died, Crystal started tracking Tony's whereabouts through his cell phone. It wasn't just a random act. She had grown suspicious about certain aspects of Tony's life that she didn't think he was being honest about. Due to those suspicions not being totally confirmed by any rock-solid evidence thus far, we have to kind of leave it at that. She was very suspicious about something sinister. Crystal's sister Jana retrieved a lot of her information from her cell phone that she has documented records of. She found that Crystal's last location activity on her phone was January 27th, 2023 at 5:44 p.m. Jana believes that this is when Crystal signed into Tony's account to access his location, because it was at that time when Crystal began tracking the location and movements of Tony and his daily activities. An email Jana found in Tony's trash folder in his email account indicated he and Crystal had a Ring camera system at their home, and that it had been updated on that day as well, January 27th. Sheriff Scott Matthews has the only copy of that email. However, in a recorded meeting with the sheriff that we will listen to soon, Jana does tell him that her sister and Tony have a Ring doorbell camera and gave him the email proof that a device was logged into that camera on January 27th. Tony told Crystal's brother, Dane, that the camera had not been active in a month. Jana came across something that really stood out. She had opened Crystal's laptop and noticed that, for whatever reason, she was still logged into Tony's Google account. While she was looking through it, Jana ended up in his email, and there, in the trash folder, was a message dated February 7th at 9:15 p.m., and she took a picture of it. The email was from Google, and it mentioned that Tony's location history had been turned on in January. It explained that location history is a setting tied to your Google account. It basically creates a timeline mapping out all the places you've been, your routes, and your trips. Crystal must have seen this too and trashed it so Tony wouldn't see it. This made it clear that she had access to where Tony had been going. On February 8th, 2023, the night before Crystal died, Tony went through his phone and deleted some very specific contacts. It wasn't just random names either. These were people whose connections to him raised eyebrows, at least for Jana. A couple of weeks later, on February 23rd, she and other family members sat down with Sheriff Matthews and brought this up in their recorded meeting as well. They even went over the phone numbers tied to those deleted contacts, but after that day, it was never mentioned again. Sheriff Matthews is the only one who still has copies of those numbers. Jana had given them to him during that meeting, and if you listen back to the recording, you can actually hear him brushing it all off. He dismissed the fact that Tony had deleted those contacts the night before Crystal's death, like it wasn't a big deal. But here's the thing. Some of the deleted contacts had their occupation saved in Tony's phone. One was a coroner, another a chief deputy, a pastor, and someone listed as the manager or owner of a restaurant called the Bakery Barn in Oak Grove. Coincidentally, that's the same place Tony had visited the day Crystal died. Still, February 8th, just about 12 hours before Crystal's estimated time of death, something happened that's never sat right with Jana. Someone logged into the shared AT&T phone account that belonged to both Tony and Crystal. It was the first time anyone had ever accessed it, and Jana only knew about it because of an email she found buried in Tony's trash folder. She wishes she still had that email, but the only copy now is with Sheriff Matthews. For reference, during their recorded meeting with him, this came up as well. You'll hear Jana start to explain how all of the pieces were starting to fit together. She showed him more documents pulled from Crystal's laptop, including that AT&T email sent to Tony's inbox, which said a one-time verification code had been requested. That happened at exactly 11:40 a.m. on February 8th, the day before everything changed. The family truly believes, based on everything that they've gathered, that it was Crystal who logged into the account. She had begun to discover more than just suspicions. She was following a trail, piecing things together. And that login, it feels like one of those final steps she took in trying to understand what was really going on. February 9th, 2023, at 8:06 a.m., Tony left his and Crystal's home. That would be the last morning she would be alive. By 8:54 a.m., he had arrived at an address in Bastrop. It was confirmed that he was there to work on a refrigerator for a man named Darren Billings. He didn't stay long. At 9:59 a.m., he left that location. Less than an hour later, at 10:53 a.m., Tony showed up at 305 East Main Street in Oak Grove. That address was saved in his Google account as work, but it's not just any workplace. It's the West Carroll Parish Sheriff's Department. And then, at exactly 11 a.m., Crystal's estimated time of death was recorded. That time is listed on her death certificate, officially given by the West Carroll Parish coroner, Lewis Carter. That narrow window of time, those movements, the locations, none of it feels like coincidence. At 11:09 a.m., just 9 minutes after arriving, Tony left the West Carroll Parish Sheriff's Department. 2 minutes later, at 11:11 a.m., he pulled into the bakery barn close by. He stayed there for about 42 minutes and then left at 11:53 a.m. By 12:01 p.m., Tony had arrived at Forest High School. This is the place where Detective Alan Irby later claimed Tony had been all day working. But that raised some serious red flags. As someone who works within a public school system, Jana knows how strict those environments are. She knows private maintenance workers are not allowed to just go in and work on school property, especially when their business license has been revoked and they're not insured. Even if he had been hired for something, school auditors would have flagged any payments made to someone like Tony, considering he couldn't legally operate under his LLC anymore. At 1:16 p.m., a FedEx package was delivered to the home that Crystal and Tony shared, but no one answered the door. Then, at 2:43 p.m., Tony checked out his daughter from Forest High. What's strange is that any other day, she would ride the bus home, but on this day, he took her himself. Why? Did he not want her to walk into a scene that would traumatize her for the rest of her life? What followed next is even more suspicious. Records show that instead of taking the direct 9-minute route to Sonic, Tony drove around Oak Grove slowly. So slowly that GPS data shows him stopping in town between 3:03 and 3:10 p.m. for a full 7 minutes. No exact address was recorded, and all in all, it took him 35 minutes to drive just 6.2 miles to the Sonic Drive-In. Again, this was a trip that would have taken no more than 10 minutes. He finally arrived at Sonic at 3:25 p.m. and stayed until 3:57 p.m. When he left, his next stop was Walmart, which should have just been a 3-minute drive away. Instead, it took him 6 minutes to go just 1.5 miles. At 4:03 p.m., he and his daughter arrived at the Walmart Supercenter and left only 8 minutes later at 4:11. Then, at 4:16, a Google search was recorded from a Galaxy S8 Plus, which would be Tony's phone, looking up East Carroll Medical Clinic, Lake Providence, Louisiana. All of this paints a timeline filled with questionable gaps and strange detours on a day that already carried such heavy weight. Jana arrived at her sister Crystal's home at exactly 5:08 p.m. What should have been a 26-minute drive from Bastrop only took her 16 minutes. She even drove through 3 separate towns. Meanwhile, Tony had only been moving around within 1 town. When Jana pulled up, the scene looked like something out of a crime show. Several marked patrol cars lined the road, emergency lights flashing in the dusk. A coroner-type vehicle was pulled into the driveway, and the front yard had already been wrapped in yellow crime scene tape. The first person she saw? Tony. He walked up to Jana, hugged her, and with the coldest kind of composure said, "It's a single gunshot wound to the head." No emotion, no explanation, just that. She didn't respond. She couldn't. Instead, Jana slowly made her way to the farthest edge of the crime scene tape, closest to the road, standing just beside the coroner's vehicle. That's when Tony's daughter came up to her. She hugged Jana gently, didn't shed a tear, and simply said, my best friend is dead. Tony was standing just a few feet away from them when a man, one of the officials, she assumed, walked up to him and said, quote, "We still have to send her body off for an autopsy." Then the man backed the coroner's vehicle further into the driveway. And right then, without hesitation or warning, Tony turned to Jana and asked, quote, "I kinda hate to ask you this, but do you want her services in Bastrop or Oak Grove?" Jana couldn't believe what she was hearing. She looked at him straight in the eyes and said firmly, "Bastrop." More and more of Tony's family came by. Some had already been there when Jana had gotten there. Others trickled in after. Out of all of them, only two came up to her, a woman named Sherry and another named Angie. Sherry wasted no time. She went right into telling Jana how, quote, sad and depressed Crystal had been. She spoke about Crystal's medication, her antidepressants, and how they had clearly led to her suicide. She insisted that, quote, the signs were there and that no matter how many silly memes she sent her, Crystal just wouldn't laugh anymore. While Sherry went on with this narrative, the man with the coroner vehicle informed Tony that they were about to bring Crystal's body out. That's when Tony turned to Jana again and said, quote, "Come on, Jana, you don't need to see her like this." She snapped. "See her like what, Tony?" He didn't respond. Neither did Sherry. They just walked away, leaving Jana standing there. The whole time, Crystal's own sister, her flesh and blood, was completely ignored by every single officer, investigator, and coroner on the scene. Not one of them even asked who she was. But in that lonely moment, someone stepped forward. Angie, one of Tony's relatives, maybe a cousin, maybe his sister. She's still not too sure, but she came out of nowhere, gently grabbed Jana's right hand and said, quote, "I know you don't know me, and we're not family, but you don't need to go through this alone." That one act of kindness, that was Crystal. She knew it was. It was like she reached through the chaos to make sure that someone was there for her baby sister one last time. Jana stayed there for exactly 34 minutes, long enough to witness every single law enforcement official call Tony's family by their first names, but not a single one of them ever asked hers. At 5:42 p.m., she finally left and drove back home to Bastrop. At 5:56 p.m., Tony left the scene too. He drove 12.2 miles, but for some reason, it took him 42 minutes to get where he was going. And where did he go? At 6:38 p.m., he showed back up at 305 East Main Street in Oak Grove, the West Carroll Sheriff's Department, the same place he had visited just before Crystal's estimated time of death. At 7:28 p.m. that evening, still reeling from everything that she had seen and heard, Jana reached out to someone she trusted, someone she hoped could help her figure out how to get through what was starting to feel very, very wrong. Jana sent a text message to a sheriff friend of hers, Mike Tubbs, the current sheriff of Morehouse Parish in Bastrop, Louisiana. She said, quote, "Mike, this is Jana. Hey, I know it's out of your jurisdiction, but I need some help desperately. My sister died tonight in West Carroll Parish. Right now, it's under investigation as a suicide, but I just want to be sure nothing is left untouched because this just isn't my sister. Maybe I'm in denial, but please, please help if you can, to be sure they look for anything suspicious. Her name is Crystal McCrory Jones." He responded quickly, saying, quote, "I will speak to them over there. We are flying home tonight." It gave Jana a tiny sliver of hope, just knowing that someone she trusted might be able to get involved, someone who wasn't already wrapped up in whatever was going on in West Carroll Parish. She didn't know what he might discover or how far he could go, but she knew she had to try. Jana felt she owed that much to Crystal. At 8:56 p.m., still in shock and struggling to make sense of the day, Jana reached out to another trusted friend, someone in law enforcement that she'd known from Morehouse Parish, Libby Brixey. She texted her, holding back tears, but her fingers were trembling with urgency and heartache. Quote, "Hey, I know it's out of your jurisdiction, but I need some help desperately. My sister died tonight in West Carroll Parish. Right now it's under investigation as a suicide, but I just want to be sure that nothing is left untouched because this just isn't my sister. Maybe I'm in denial, but please, please help if you can, to be sure that they look for anything suspicious. Her name is Crystal McCrory Jones. Libby, my heart hurts so bad. Me and my brothers told my mom, and she lost it. I feel nothing but numb." Libby responded, quote, "Do you know who's working it? Sheriff's office or police department?" Jana replied, "Sheriff's office." Her husband, Tony Jones, used to work for the sheriff's office there as a reserve officer, and they relayed information to him that they wouldn't even relay to me. For example, it was a single gunshot wound to the head. They were sending her off for an autopsy. They tried to whisper that while I was 3 feet away. They said out loud that they didn't suspect foul play. End quote. Even just relaying it all probably felt unreal. She was there, but at the same time, it was like she was the outsider. Crystal's husband, someone who should have been investigated like any other person in her life, was instead being confided in, and Jana was just left on the sidelines watching, listening, hurting. The numbness had not left her, but something else was beginning to grow alongside it. Determination. Remember, on February 9th, 2023, at 1:16 p.m., a FedEx package was delivered to Tony and Crystal's home. They found out the carrier on that route that day was none other than Jana's cousin, Loretta. Though not Crystal's biological cousin, they were close, raised together like sisters. Because of this, Loretta often found herself stepping inside the house when she delivered packages, whether to chat for a few minutes or simply use the restroom. That day, Loretta delivered a package containing a cell phone for Tony. Both Tony's white work truck and Crystal's beige Tahoe were parked in the circular driveway. Yet, no one came to the door, despite multiple attempts made by Loretta, who needed to use the restroom. During the recorded meeting with Sheriff Matthews, Jana brought this up as well. They discussed the package and also the fact that Tony had paid over $150 just the day before Crystal's death to have a phone fixed. Sheriff Matthews retains the only copy of the receipt for that transaction. Jana went on to mention the package delivered that day at 1:16 p.m., making sure he realized the timing of it all. What stood out even more was that Tony activated the new phone at 8:35 p.m. on the same day that Crystal passed. Sheriff Matthews admits in the meeting to giving Tony the package from the front doorstep. Jana also shared with the sheriff that she had tried unsuccessfully to reach Detective Alan Irby regarding that package. On February 12, 2023, at 5:10 p.m., Jana's grief and desperation reached a breaking point. She sent Tony a long text message, one that came from a place of deep anguish. She begged him, pleaded with him to tell her something, anything, about her sister's final moments. Jana just needed to know if she had suffered or if there was anything she could understand about her last thoughts. Jana's text reads as follows. Tony, my sister loved you with her whole heart. She loved Cheyenne just like she loved her boys. I'm so sorry that you're going through this, and my heart breaks for Cheyenne. I'm angry. I'm sad. I'm numb. I'm everything and nothing all at once. My sister was and still is my best friend. I have so many regrets of not calling and texting her more over the past year. My heart hurts so bad for my girls when they collapsed to the ground when I told them. To see an 8-year-old baby scream out for her Aunt Crystal was the most gut-wrenching thing I've ever experienced. I wish I could wake up from this and it would just be a dream. Every time I turn around, I see something that reminds me of her. I can't even eat a steak without thinking of her because, let's be honest, who else eats a steak that's cooked more like beef jerky other than me and my sister? For 33 years, I had her. 33 years, Tony. And now I don't. My heart will never be the same. I grieve different than everyone else. I feel like I have to be strong for them and be a hard ass and hold it in. You know me well enough to know that I have RBF worse than anyone on this planet. But know that I do love you, and I love Cheyenne, and I'm sorry. I just want to know my best friend's last thoughts or words or actions in the final minutes that she was here. I want to know that she didn't suffer. I just want to know someone, anyone told her that they loved her before she took her life. My sister is gone. My only sister. I just want my heart to rest knowing that she knew she was loved. Please look for a note, a letter, anything. Anything that will give me closure to know that she knew she was loved. Her demons won, Tony, but she will always be loved by you and so many more. A sister's bond is like no other that anyone will understand. My sister taught me to straighten my hair, to put on makeup. She let me crawl into bed with her when I was little and got scared. I rode a Greyhound bus for 32 hours when I was 8 and 10 years old to New York to visit her. She taught me that the best thing at Wendy's to eat was a baked potato with bacon and cheese. Sonic was definitely tater tots with chili and cheese and a large cherry limeade. And I don't even have time to get into her favorites at Olive Garden. You know how much she loved that place. We could finish each other's sentences and finish the song lyrics that we were thinking of. I'll never be able to mix up her clothes hangers' colors in her closet anymore just to get on her nerves or send her funny memes that no one gets but her. She loved my girls, Tony, with everything she had. My JC and my Aubrey adored her. Please forgive me if I'm being an ass, but I miss her, Tony, and I'm scared of going on without her. After Jana's long emotional message, Tony said, quote, I hurt too, and I told her when I got off the phone I loved her, and Cheyenne did too that morning before she left, and I know everyone grieves different, and I love y'all too. End quote. On February 13th, 2023 at 10 a.m., Jana and others met with Mr. Todd Nevels to discuss the funeral arrangements for Crystal at Cox Funeral Home in Bastrop, Louisiana. Though Mr. Nevels was primarily employed at the Oak Grove location of Cox Funeral Home, Tony insisted on having him come to Bastrop for the meeting. Once again, it seemed that Tony only wanted people from Oak Grove involved in any aspect of her sister's death. What was also troubling, though not immediately clear to them at the time, was that Mr. Nevels wasn't just an employee of Cox Funeral Home. Tony had done quite a bit of handyman work at both the Oak Grove location of the funeral home and at Mr. Nevels' own home. Work notes and records kept by Crystal, which Jana later obtained from her laptop, were included in the very well-organized documents of evidence that Jana gave to the police. To make matters worse, it came to light that Tony was not a licensed contractor and that his license had been inactive and revoked since 2018. There is also documented evidence of this. But going back to the meeting with Mr. Todd Nevels, it was attended by Jana, Crystal's sister, Dane, Crystal's brother, Julie, Crystal's sister-in-law, Tony, Crystal's legal spouse, James, Tony's father, and Todd Nevels, of course, the representative of Cox Funeral Home. They discussed the cost of same-day visitation and service versus having it on a different day and the fact that Crystal had no burial insurance. Tony stated that he received numerous donations from the Oak Grove community, but that he was considering taking out a loan to cover the remaining expenses. Well, Jana could not let that stand. She objected, saying that Crystal would never have wanted to be buried with a loan hanging over her. She offered to take care of the remaining balance herself. This was before Jana had even acquired the laptop and the evidence that plainly showed they'd all been lied to about Tony's whereabouts on the day of Crystal's death. Todd Nevels suggested creating a GoFundMe account to help with the remaining costs. Tony replied that he didn't know how to create one, so Jana told them both that she would take care of it, creating the account under her name and using her personal checking account to fund it. They talked about the funeral expenses a little more, and Tony did acknowledge that there was a bill totaling between $6,000 and $6,500, which he signed, consenting to pay for it. The conversation continued with questions about the service. Jana, Crystal's brother Dane, and Julie, Crystal's sister-in-law, answered most of the questions about family names, birthplaces, and other details that the funeral home needed to complete their arrangements. On February 13th, 2023, at 11:51 p.m., Tony Google searched, quote, "What is the appropriate time to date after the death of a spouse?" It felt surreal to Jana that just days after Crystal's death, he was already seeking out guidance on moving forward romantically. The timing of this search was unsettling, especially in the midst of all the uncertainty and the mounting questions surrounding her death. On February 15th, 2023, Tony had previously informed the funeral home that he wanted to see Crystal in the casket as soon as possible, fully made up and dressed. Despite his specific request, he failed to provide any assistance when it came to finding someone to do her hair and makeup or even help in finding clothing that would suit her for the service. That responsibility fell on Julie and Jana. She and Julie spent hours at the funeral home that afternoon, applying makeup to make sure Crystal looked as beautiful as she always did. It was a difficult, emotional thing to do, but they knew Crystal would want them to take care of her with love. Julie, too, spent hours going from store to store, using her own money to buy a suitable outfit for Crystal, one that matched the way she had always wanted to be seen. Julie also found a stylist who was willing to properly groom Crystal's hair for the service and made sure to pay for the stylist's services herself. All of this was done to fulfill Tony's wishes because the funeral home had contacted Julie, asking for these things to be taken care of immediately because of him. Yet, despite all the work that the pair put into making sure Crystal was presented beautifully for the service, Tony did not show up that day to view her body. While Julie and Jana were preparing Crystal for her final services, they noticed something that made their hearts ache even more. There was a lot of bruising on Crystal's body. It wasn't something you would expect to see, especially when considering the supposed nature of her death. When they brought it to the attention of the funeral home director, he said to Julie, quote, "None of these injuries would be the result of an autopsy process." The injuries were undeniable. Abrasions and lacerations on her left forearm, along with significant bruising. Her left ring finger was missing a fingernail, and although her nails had been freshly painted, there was dirt and debris beneath them. There was also extensive bruising on her legs and inner thighs, marks that no one could explain, and it all left them feeling sick. The funeral director advised Julie to take photos of Crystal's body, which they did. Those photos have also been provided as evidence to police to show what they saw, things that should not have been there. The next day, February 16th, Tony had a female friend, Katrina Hendry, accompany him to view Crystal's body. She was not a relative, and the funeral director, Charles Evans, who knew Tony pretty well, told him that bringing a woman who was not related to him to view his wife's body did not look appropriate. The situation became even harder for Jana to process, having something like this added to everything else that had been happening. The same day, at 5:46 p.m., Tony called Crystal's brother Dane to tell him something that was chilling. He said that he, himself, had found the missing shell casing in the bedroom where Crystal's death occurred. This was a week later, and investigators and cleaners had come into the room already. The room was small, about 15 by 15 feet, and neither Dane nor Jana could understand how they could have missed something like that. Tony then asked Dane, quote, not to question Detective Irby about the shell casing, as a favor. This was a strange request, especially considering the circumstances. The shell casing will be discussed later in the recorded meeting with Sheriff Scott Matthews, but at this point, it seems like there was more being hidden. On February 17th at 7:59 a.m., while Jana was at work, her phone rang. It was Dane. His voice alone, tinged with frustration, let her know the gravity of the situation. This is when he told Jana that Tony had called him the night before, saying that he had found the missing shell casing in the room where Crystal's tragic death had occurred. Her heart sank. It had been a full week since law enforcement and cleaners had combed through that very room. How could this casing be overlooked? And why was Tony the one to find it? In a quick attempt to delay Crystal's cremation, a final step she had always opposed, Jana called a long list of attorneys and district attorneys who are all across northeast Louisiana. She poured her heart out to each one, explaining the discovery of the shell casing and the disturbing questions it raised. Despite her pleas, her attempts to halt the cremation were met with silence and indifference. No one took action. The family's wishes went unheard. After Crystal's funeral services, Jana began texting with Sheriff Mike Tubbs of Morehouse Parish. These were difficult conversations, but she felt she had no other choice. Jana told Mike about the shell casing that had been found over a week after Crystal's death, and expressed to him her growing concern that her death had not been investigated properly. Mike was someone she trusted. During her undergraduate degree internship, she worked under him at the Morehouse Parish Sheriff's Department in the Juvenile Division. So, when she reached out to him, it was as a friend, hoping he might be able to help or at least offer some guidance. After the funeral, Jana texted Mike again, telling him she was ready to talk. The phone records of their conversations are included in the evidence. It was a difficult thing for her to even think about, but she had to try every possible avenue to make sure nothing was overlooked. Also, on February 18th, 2023, the day of Crystal's visitation and funeral service, the air felt so heavy, overloaded with grief and the weight of all these questions that hung over everything. Jana and her family went through the painful process, watching Crystal being laid to rest, but still, the mystery of her death remained unresolved. At the end of the services, Tony handed Jana a bag from Cox Funeral Home as people were filing out. It contained the programs, a DVD of the picture slideshow, the guest book, and thank you cards. All the mementos of Crystal's final farewell. Tony had no interest in any of it. "You keep it," he said, with an air of indifference that seemed out of place for someone who had just lost a spouse. The next day, February 19th, Jana reached out to Tony through text. She needed answers about the funeral expenses and the donations that had been collected. She asked him point blank how much of the money had actually been used for Crystal's funeral costs. She pressed for receipts, anything to shed light on where the money had gone, but Tony was uncooperative, providing nothing in return. The silence only added to the growing unease she felt. The following day, Jana contacted Sheriff Mike Tubbs again. This time, she was determined to get in touch with West Carroll Sheriff Scott Matthews. She needed someone who could help her make sense of the events surrounding Crystal's death. Every conversation, every message, felt like a step closer to finding the truth, but each day also felt like a step further from any real answers. The weight of Crystal's death, combined with the number of questions, began to take its toll on Jana. But the day was far from ordinary, as Jana's mind was reeling, and she turned her attention to a laptop that she had purchased for Crystal years ago. Tony, almost too willing to cooperate, had handed it over along with the password to unlock it. This is when she found out that Crystal was logged into Tony's Gmail account, which she had never owned. The pieces were slowly coming together. Jana began digging deeper into the contents of the laptop. She hit the information jackpot. Emails, usernames, passwords, browser history, but the most critical find was the location timeline from Tony's phone via Google Maps, the very device that could hold the key to understanding the tragic events of that day. When Jana confronted Tony about this, his response was cold and evasive. Quote, "Was there something specific you were looking for?" he asked. Jana's voice, still steady despite the growing pit in her stomach, simply replied, quote, "A suicide note." Tony claimed he'd searched high and low for one, but if he had really looked, he would have known that the laptop Crystal used every day had his own information logged in, yet it seemed he hadn't bothered to check it, so he had no idea. February 20th, the unthinkable for the family happened that afternoon. Crystal's body was cremated, 2 days before her autopsy results had even been released. It was a jarring violation of the family's wishes. 2 days later, Crystal's autopsy was completed by Dr. Frank Peretti, yet another step in a process that had already been clouded by haste and negligence. Jana, refusing to let go of her suspicions, continued to text Sheriff Mike Tubbs from Morehouse Parish. She needed to get in touch with Sheriff Scott Matthews from West Carroll Parish. The walls were closing in, but she wouldn't stop fighting for the truth. Jana's frustration reached its peak as she texted Sheriff Scott Matthews. She was desperate for any information regarding the time of death in the case. The responses she had been getting so far were sparse and unsatisfactory. February 23rd, the same day as the meeting, Jana made another trip to Cox Funeral Home in Bastrop. She was hoping to finally retrieve the remains of her sister, but what she learned when she arrived was unsettling. Jana had previously made arrangements with her nephew, Crystal's eldest son Corbin, to have his portion of the ashes sent to him in New York. But when she got there, she was told by Josh Lebron, a funeral home worker, that Tony had already picked up the remains an hour earlier. Josh told Jana that Tony refused to let the funeral home separate the ashes for the family, or even ship them to Corbin at no charge. Instead, he insisted on handling everything himself. A sense of unease flew all over Jana. Why was Tony acting so weird about something so simple? The remains were meant to be shared among family, yet there he was, taking control of everything. Later at 5:17 p.m., Jana texted Charles Evans, the funeral director, asking if he had spoken to Tony about the ashes. Mr. Evans returned her call and confirmed what Josh had said. He mentioned his, quote, close friendship with Tony, which seemed to play a significant role in how he'd handled the situation. Mr. Evans assured Jana that he could get Tony to bring the ashes back by Monday so they could be properly divided and sent to the family. But as Jana hung up the phone, the gnawing feeling that something wasn't right just grew stronger. Why was Tony being so secretive and controlling about something as simple as the ashes? The long-awaited meeting with Sheriff Matthews took place. I will give a quick run-through of the meeting, but I will also upload the full recorded meeting as a separate episode. It's a little over an hour, but I wanted you all to be able to listen to it for yourselves as well. When Jana sat down across from Sheriff Matthews, the weight of her sister's death hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. She wasn't alone. Her brother Dane and cousin Kara were there too, both holding on to stacks of evidence, questions, and heartbreak. The purpose was clear. They were not walking into that sheriff's office to point fingers. They came to present a full, carefully constructed picture of what had happened and to ask for the truth to be treated like it mattered. Jana began by laying out the foundation. She presented the sheriff with documentation that Crystal had been tracking Tony's location before her death. Screenshots from her laptop showed his whereabouts pinned to a hotel in Bastrop. That alone raised questions, but the pattern of concern did not stop there. The sheriff listened, nodding as he recognized one of the addresses. He acknowledged his team had already spoken with Darren Billings, a man Tony claimed to have worked for that morning of Crystal's death. Jana made it clear that she was not speculating. She had corroborating text from the sheriff in another parish to verify this location detail. She wasn't just grieving, she was proving. From there, things spiraled deeper. Jana brought up the fact that Tony's location history had been enabled on his Google account. That laptop had become a goldmine of truth, containing everything from Tony's browser history to a detailed Google Maps timeline of the day Crystal died. The more they learned, the less things added up. Alongside these digital trails were deeply personal documents Crystal had saved, like quotes, mental health reflections, snapshots of her tidy, color-coded life. Nothing about her digital or emotional footprint hinted at suicidal thoughts. Dane added that Crystal had recently become a grandmother, something she was so excited about. Kara pointed out the inconsistencies between Crystal's behavior and the suicide theory, saying what they all felt. The timelines and the facts did not align with that conclusion. Then they talked about the shell casing, which Tony claimed to have found 8 days after Crystal died in their small 15 by 15 foot bedroom. A shell casing in plain view, supposedly overlooked by detectives and a professional cleanup crew. When confronted about it, Sheriff Matthews admitted it had been missed. He said it could have been caught in her hair or clothing, even though Crystal had short hair and was only wearing a bathrobe and underwear at the time. He insisted it was visible in a crime scene photo that his team had taken, but Jana, having seen those photos later on, would learn the casing was not in any of them. That fact stayed with her. It was the kind of thing that didn't just bend the truth, it broke it. As the discussion went on, Sheriff Matthews tried to clarify how Tony might have learned details about Crystal's death before the autopsy was even completed. He suggested that maybe he himself had told Tony it was a gunshot wound to ease the shock of losing a spouse, but this didn't sit right with the family. Jana had arrived at the scene only 17 minutes after Tony, and she remembered exactly what he said. Quote, "It's a single gunshot wound to the head." That wasn't something a man in shock just blurts out without knowing it for sure. The meeting went deeper than just the crime scene. They went into finances. Dane talked about new money coming in, such as credit cards being paid off, payments on a storage unit in Tennessee, a rental car booked for Hawaii, and even a purchase of cryptocurrency. All of it was happening just days after Crystal's death. Jana had found documentation for all of it on the laptop. Then there was the GoFundMe, donations from a community mourning Crystal, while Tony seemed to be using the money for anything but funeral expenses. And then the conversation took a turn towards something else. Dane spoke up about what he'd learned regarding Tony's past, including a restraining order from an ex-wife. He explained that Crystal had started suspecting some very serious things, let's say, before her death. Sheriff Matthews asked for contact info for the ex-wife, Jana Jones, and Jana said that she would reach out on Facebook. But the suspicions that Crystal had happened to also be the final straw in Jana and Tony's marriage, allegedly. Julie joined the meeting later and added even more layers. She talked about how Crystal was right-handed, something that raised flags when the autopsy and injury locations were discussed. She recounted how Tony had claimed Crystal's suicide was caused by her not taking Abilify, a story he spread immediately after her death. Julie also described Crystal's mental and emotional state, insisting she had seen no signs of severe depression, only love for her kids and excitement about becoming a grandmother. When Julie mentioned Tony's controlling behavior and verbal abuse, Sheriff Matthews responded. He said he believed everything that they were saying, but he also said that being a bad person doesn't make someone a criminal. That was something he repeated often. Oh, Tony might be dishonest, manipulative, even cruel, but until they could prove a crime had occurred, there was only so much the law could do. Still, the sheriff didn't shy away from calling Tony what he was, a chronic liar. He said it plainly, again and again, making it clear that even though Tony had told people he worked with the sheriff's office, he didn't. He said Tony could claim whatever he wanted publicly, even post it as his workplace on Facebook. That didn't make it true, he said. Julie reminded Sheriff Matthews that it's illegal to impersonate a police officer. The sheriff responded with frustration, saying that unless someone filed a complaint about Tony pulling people over or making traffic stops, there wasn't much they could act on. He told her that she had to, quote, let that go. But letting it go wasn't exactly what any of them could do, especially Jana. When the talk came back around to the investigation itself, Sheriff Matthews assured them that he was taking the case seriously. He said his department was having the firearm tested and that they were still actively looking into things. He also promised that if he ever felt his department was not capable of handling it, he'd hand it off to the state. He insisted again that the case was never truly closed. As the meeting wound down, he became more personal. The sheriff admitted that he had a different way of talking and working, said he wasn't a politician and didn't want to play games with people's grief. He told them that he could see the pain in their eyes and if there was anything he could do to relieve it, he would. He handed out his personal phone number and told Jana to call him directly if anything else came up. Not a deputy, not an assistant, him. He even asked if he could pray with her. And as everyone left the room, emotions raw and hearts very heavy, Jana was left with that card in her hand and a mountain of questions still in her chest. She had gone in with hope. Hope that someone would finally hear them and take it all seriously. Whether that hope was justified or not, she still didn't know. But she said what needed to be said. And she was not done. Not by a long shot. The recorded meeting will be available to listen to by the middle of the week. We have so much more to dive into, including what Tony told the police about February 9th, 2023. What he did that day according to him, and so much more. So stay tuned for part 2, coming out later this week, which will be the recorded meeting, and then part 3 will be next Monday. There are some things you can do in the meantime. Follow her sister Jana on social media to stay up to date on the latest news about Crystal's case. Her links will be in the show notes, as well as the petition that you can sign in support of reopening the investigation. Until next time, friends, stay safe and take care.
Thank you for listening to this episode. As we close out, let us not forget awareness is our greatest defense. In a world that can be dark and grim, vigilance is our beacon of hope. When it comes to the cases we have explored together that have remained unsolved, if you happen to hold a piece of the puzzle, dare to step forward. As author Lois McMaster Bujold once said, "The dead cannot cry out for justice. It is a duty of the living to do so for them." Until we reconvene, my friends, stay vigilant and stay informed.